We out of red in England. All aboard, yeah, you know it's Hype Train FC. Modern ambition, we got blue and gold in our kit. Plus, you know we the champs of the league, and we don't quit. Started from grassroots, yeah, the sport, we ain't taking it light. You know it's real, from fantasy to the field. You better believe the hype. Yeah.
Hello everyone and welcome aboard the Hype Train podcast to another episode with a guest interview. And today I've got two guests lined up. They're both from a very popular social media team online, Caversham United, who are leading the way alongside a few other teams with what it takes to be a modern football team in 2023. Nev Swift and James Tapscott, who were the manager and the assistant manager of Caversham, are about to join me as we talk all things reserve team football, what it takes to start up a team, as well as their journey in their inaugural season in the Reading and District Sunday League, in which they got to a cup final in their first season. Nev and James talked to me a lot about their expertise and their experience and a lot of their history and what it takes to really get going a reserve team. So let's get straight into it. It's a lengthy episode and we really hope that you enjoy our sit down with James and Neville. On second thought, just before we head into the podcast with Neville and James, I think it's imperative we just cover their cup final, which will be brought up in length in the podcast here. The Caversham team in white took the lead in the first half from Tommy Elmore before the second half saw Richfield come back and get an equaliser. The team at Caversham were heavy underdogs in this game. Everybody believed that Richfield was just going to run away with a comfortable 4-5-6-0 win. They did equalise, with both goals coming from a cutback, which resulted in a penalty kick scenario after a 1-0 draw and 90 minutes played. When it come to the decisive moments, Caversham not only missed the one penalty, on second asking, they also missed a second penalty, which allowed Richfield the opportunity to win it from a 3-2 advantage, which would have made it 4-2. They didn't make a mistake to win the John Lusted Cup in the 2022-23 season, and we're going to be bringing it up, but just for context's sake in the podcast, it's worth covering the basics before we speak to James and Neville in length. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Hype Train podcast. I am here with two special guests today. What I'll do is I'll introduce them first of all. So Neville, do you want to introduce yourself first of all?
Yeah, hi, my name is Neville Swift and I'm currently manager of Caversham United Reserves in Division 4 of the Reading and District Sunday League.
And James, over to you, mate.
I'm James Tapscott, Nev's assistant manager, helping with the Caversham Reserves side in Div 4.
Lovely. So I'll help steer the conversation to begin. And what I would really like to talk about is the reserve team and how that's come to be. So last season was the Caversham's reserve team first season.
Yeah.
So how did you two get involved with this project?
I had played for many clubs over too many years, Rob. And I'd folded the club I was player managing for, the Warwick Arms. I'd folded because whilst we had a number of players signed on, I was having trouble getting players committed every week in, week out. So I happened to chance upon a Twitter account from Cav United asking for trialists and players for the season. So I think it was about 4 years ago, I went along to one of the trials, met up with Paul and Joe at the time who were managing, and signed on and had a season for them. Thankfully, they got promoted. Given my age and my ability, I thought it was probably best I stayed in a lower league. So I then signed on for Tireless Titans. It was reported as on loan in the press and in the papers, but I signed on for Calcutta for Tireless. They folded. Then I went to play for Calcutta for a couple of years, and then Paul approached me in the summer of 2 years ago now, and said, Cav obviously have got first team, women's team, we're thinking of doing a reserve team. And I said, more than happy. I intended to sign on as player manager. Thankfully for the boys that have signed on over the last couple of years, I've managed more than played. So that's how I've got involved with Caversham really over the last couple of years.
And James?
Yeah, I used to go and watch Cav quite a lot when obviously Nev was in that team when they was on about the promotion. And then I stopped going. And then in the end, I think Nev took over as reserve team manager. and then just give me a shout and asked if I wanted to come along and just give him and obviously Paul a hand, mainly to help Nev just like assist him with the reserve team. So yeah, that's how it come about. And I said, yeah, I didn't really know what to expect at first, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really got into it. So it's good. I've learned a lot.
To be fair, none of us did, Rob.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Well,
Like,
all we knew is we were herding cats.
Yeah, it's as I said to Nev, like, yeah, because we had our little managers thing last Tuesday, and I said to Paul, like, from the first game we played last season to how we finished the season, like at one point and at Nev, like, we just felt, nah, this ain't gonna last, and then yeah, it just somehow it just turned around and we ended up going really far.
Yeah.
So the process of you guys joining, so you didn't have any experience managing before. Was it morely from the playing side and the spectator side of it?
No, I'd started managing when I was 19. I managed the Prudential, what was the Ibis team at the Prudential, where the Ibis setup at the football club was you either had to work for the club. Yeah. You either had to work at the Prudential or be an affiliate member of the Ibis Social Club. So I was probably last man standing one season on a Sunday for the third team. We had at a time we had 3 teams on a Sunday, 4 on a Saturday, where I was asked after a season if I could manage. So I started managing a football club at the age of 19. Managed throughout. I was at the Ibis for about 14 years, managing reserves and third team. Then I went on to play for the Warwick and manage them. So I had experience of, when we say managing, let's set the expectations for the podcast. The leagues at which we manage, in inverted commas, is like herding cats. Really, there's no Pep Guardiola magic to this sort of thing. It is dealing with egos. It is dealing with players who can be their mindset outstrips their ability, sort of thing. So I think it's managing is probably a loose term of words. We try and corral people into getting a formation, and then we go from there, Rob, to be fair. But I had experience.
So you throw a shirt at somebody and see what sticks. Yeah.
Pretty much. And playing at Div 4, you have to select the right size of shirt. It's not even a shirt. It's whether it's extra large or medium, to be fair. So it's all dependent upon that. And if you can get somebody close to the goalkeeping jersey, even better. That normally sets you up for the morning, sort of thing. So it's all good.
Yeah. So obviously managing a team in the Sunday League, that's a lot more structured. For people that aren't at home, I'll give a bit of an overlay of Caversham. I used to play for them on and off for years, helping Paul out before they kind of like took off on Twitter. When they were literally just a Sunday team that used to turn up, Paul would struggle for an 11 every week, hence bringing in people like me. And eventually over time it's grown and grown and grown. They've got one of the largest followings, if not the largest, of any grassroots team on Twitter or X, how it's called now. And they're building up they've got as I said, they've got a reserve team in last season. They've got a really successful women's team, and their first team's floating about in the Sunday League as well. So we're talking about James and Nev coming in a managerial position at the reserve team level, and every time I see the reserve team play, you two are like every time. Like there seems to be universal commitment. You're never not there. It's always
we love it. We both get stuck in.
Yeah, 100%, and it's just it's all in. There seems to be no deviation. It's reliable, familiar faces. Players can change on a weekend, but it's always the same guys on the side as well. Yeah. So you did mention, James, as well, from starting at the beginning of the season last August, September, going all the way through till May, that there was a big substantial change in difference. What I'd love to hear is from a first year managing a team like this level, what you guys have learned along the way. Because what I would like to do is try to impart some information to new managers that are starting up their own teams and what they're going to learn from day 1 to day 365. What are kind of the things that you've learned along the way in the past year? I know it's a broad question, but yeah.
No, that's right. For me, unlike Nev, I've never really done anything like this before. So as I said, I didn't really know what to expect, but I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot off Nev, and just helping out. There was some games that Nev couldn't make it, and I had to sort of take charge myself. And the more and more the season went on, the more confident I become with it. of like helping him and just creating a successful team, to be honest. So yeah, I quite enjoyed it.
And in terms of the confidence with things that you were getting better at, was it your public speaking because you've got to speak to players? Was it organising players?
Much. Like, because I've never had to sort of stand in front of people and speak before. So like being surrounded in a circle and like everyone just eyes on you speaking, sometimes it's a little bit daunting. But towards the end of the season, it was just totally changed my confidence, and I was just helping them with whatever I could, to be honest.
Yeah, I'll tell you my first experience of a team talk. When I started Hype Train, I had a person called Rod involved, and he said that he was going to be doing all the team talks, and we were playing up at the Ibis actually against a team called Berkshire Dons, who aren't a team anymore. And in the changing room, Rod was like, "Okay, it's time for the team talk." So I was like, "Okay, I'm relaxed. I'll sit down." He just handed me the clipboard and just said, "Go on." And it was a nightmare because I had no idea what to say. I was using a lot of filler words, like, stuttering. And the first couple of team talks are quite pressurizing because you're trying not to sound like an idiot, first and foremost.
Obviously, you've got the legend of team talks here.
Yeah, exactly. And everything. So, so you've obviously got somebody to learn off. And I had none of that. I had 13 players looking at me and I was a deer in the headlights, and I don't know how I made it through. And it's now a bit of a blur to me. But everyone's got to go through that type of initial stage, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
I think Nev, season,
sorry. Yeah.
No, that's right. Like through the season, it got just so much easier.
Yeah. And Nev, what about you, mate? What have you learnt from running a team from day one?
Well, I think when I started out at a tender age, like many years ago, so when I started playing, it was in black and white, and we were using pigskin as a ball, sort of thing. So it was, and there was no airs and graces. It was 4-4-2. It was lump it or like it, and if you didn't track your man back, you soon got to know about it. And the team talks were largely expletive based. Your training was running 5 miles, and then you might get to kick a ball for 5 or 10 minutes, sort of thing. So it was what I would call proper old school. Was I bore the boys to death with. But I think the key thing is to success and when I say success, it's just keeping a team going, because that's what you're trying to do first and foremost. Anything that comes after that is a luxury. I was lucky when I went to set the reserves up, because I knew there was a few players who I played with at Titans, played with at the Warwick, that had drifted away. And so approaching them, I wanted to build a nucleus of players that I knew first and foremost were good players. They were reliable. They'd be almost, if you like, enforcing what we wanted to instill as a club from day one. And I think one of the things that we had at the end of the season, that the phrase I'd use for the reserves at the moment is that for this second season, I've said about recruiting players or players to come in, we don't want any idiots, we don't want any egos. I'm not interested in a superstar who might turn up once a month. I'm not interested in so-and-so's mate who might want to play if you ask him nicely. If you don't want to play, I can't make you. I'm not going to beg you to play. And I think that's the key thing that we set about doing, looking at players that we knew had played with, looking at Twitter where the trialists had come on board. So we had a lot of new players come in we didn't know from Adam, basically. So I think that's a key thing in terms of getting a good blend of people you know and people you buy into. I think in terms of sort of management on the day and on the game, it is literally keep it as simple as possible. Tell people what they want, what you want them to do, what you don't want them to do, more importantly, and then instill that and make sure that either during the season or during a game, speaking with your captain, you're engaging the squad. You make them part of the decision-making process. So you're all in it together. Whilst James and I might sort out the squad or select who's available if we've got a number of players, sort of thing. We've only got space in the squad for 16, or we've got a flex with the first team. We're all very clear in terms of communicating to the players what's not happening, what will happen and what won't happen. And I have to say, even from a reserve perspective, elevating up to a club view, the work that Paul Gutteridge does as chairman is beyond is unreal. The stuff he puts into the club is a godsend, because it helps then me just focus on managing the team, picking the squad, talking to players about football. James gets them all phoning up saying, "Oh, what do you think will happen with this?" He's good cop, I'm bad cop, basically, Rob, which always helps as well. And then it's just trying to execute that on the day. And the key thing is, regardless of whatever position you're doing in the league or what have you, just getting people to enjoy it. That's what it's about. We're not here. There's only a certain number of teams can win the league. Only a certain number of teams can play in a cup final. So it's just making sure if we're enjoying it, that's the main thing. Good things will come from that, in my view.
100%, mate.
Yeah, of course. And so we're talking a lot. So you mentioned about what Paul does for the club. Paul obviously has taken the club from literally nothing into something really, really good behind the scenes.
Yeah.
What have you guys learned about somebody or a group of people running a football club from that administration point of view? So what are your main takeaways from what, because Caversham's a very organised football team within the Sunday League circuit compared to others, whether or not it's in the Bucks and Bucks or outside in the UK. So kind of what's the points that you've gone, oh, that's good, I never knew that happened behind the scenes? Because you mostly come from a playing point of view. Sorry, go on, James.
No, that's right. It's like a bit of a family, I think, to be honest. Like, because like especially in the reserve team and stuff like that, it's just like everyone just gets on. Like we go to the pub after the game and stuff like that, and it's just a bit of a family feel, to be honest.
Yeah, I think as well. I was fortunate enough playing at the Ibis because we had everything done for us. We had the only thing I had to try and sort out as a manager when I was younger was trying to sort out a referee, which is still prevalent today, funnily enough, 35 plus years later. And I was lucky with the secretarial stuff, paying people subs. So I had an appreciation of what goes on, and even my time at the Warwick, the secretary and the chairman at the Warwick did the fines, did the subs, organised the pitches and stuff as well. So I think that was all good. I think the biggest thing, the biggest learning for me coming into sort of playing for Cav, and it was why a lot of people come in to look at Cav, is because of the social media profile. I mean, it is like you say, Rob. It is one of the biggest teams, non-league teams, being followed in Berkshire. And it's the size of the number of followers is ridiculous. Like I say, back when I started playing, you literally, the only way you found out if you were playing was you look in the Reading Chronicle or the Evening Post at the time to find if your name was in the squad in the newspaper. And nowadays, well, no, we didn't have mobiles back then, Taps, to be fair. We had cones and bits of rope, sort of thing. But no, seriously, the advent of social media, I think, in sport is a force for good. There's a force for detriment as well. But if you look at the Twitter feed that Cav puts out for the first team, for the reserves, for the women's team, it's all inclusive. It's light. It's getting people engaged, and if there was a role model of how to do Twitter, it's that sort of thing. So that's been a big learning point for me. Somebody who's I'm not that interested in social media. I just want to go in, pick a team and play football, sort of thing. But I have to accept that's now part and parcel of the game.
Yeah, of course. And James, what have you learned about coming into this? Because you're a little bit more fresh coming into this type of world. So are you used to going to meetings about football? Are you used to having these organisational points of view?
Yeah, like going to because I'd done a lot of the league meetings last year, because it's literally just like over around the corner from my house and stuff like that. And like going to the league meetings and stuff like that, you learn quite a lot. Like you get to meet new faces, different people and stuff like that. So like you get to learn like what everyone else is doing in their club as well. And the other thing I was going to say as well is that, you know, like you talk about like Twitter and social media. Like, I remember, Nev, I don't know if you was there, but the first training session from last season when we first started up, there was like 72 players on Maple Durham playing field trying to sign on. Like that's how big like the Cav social media is. That we had like 80 players in one training session.
I remember the first training session that you guys had at JMA. We had about 20 guys.
Yeah, that's it.
We had about 20 guys because people that don't listen, us and Caversham both train at the same time, split the pitch, and we train on one end, Caversham on the other. First pre-season at JMA on the 4G pitch. There's about 20 of us. We're into a game. We're getting the ball moving. And there's about 50 Caversham players doing doggies up and down the pitch for 50 minutes.
That's all we could do.
Yeah.
It was that and Bulldog, basically. To be
Yeah,
fair,
that was
that was
it.
all. Because all we could do, what we could do, like the Far Show, Charlie Charles, just playing football like 35 aside sort of thing. But that was literally there wasn't a lot we could do with that sort
It
of
was
thing.
either
But
that or 25-man drills.
yeah, exactly.
And they don't cover that in the
No.
FA Level 1 coaching course at all. They don't cover that.
I don't think whatever the new version of Bisham Abbey is now, whatever it was, they don't cover that as part of your FIFA badges. What to do with 70 people of mixed ability playing football on a half a football pitch?
They don't.
Yeah.
They tailor it towards 10 to 12 people, usually children, that are playing small-sided football, not having 50 people show up, and then you've got a manager going, "Oh my god, I wish we had 2 pitches available right now."
Yeah, exactly. But Bulldog does work, to be fair, because that gets everybody interested in getting them mobile. You can't accessibility there, Rob. To be fair, but
you look at like the summer training when you get like 50 people to winter training through like December, January, where you get like 7 to 8 people turning out to training.
Yeah, with the training element, we'll go on to that. So organising training week to week. First of all, do you do it for the sake of the audience at home? Do you do it with the first team at the same time to try to get one squad going, or do you have separate identities merged for the reserves and the first team, depending on who's around?
Certainly for last season, we did it as a club because, again, new team in, assessing abilities. People there were first team players that felt maybe they couldn't play at the Div 1 standard, wanted to drop down. There were players that came in to the reserves that could step up. And I think as part of a club, as James said, sort of being a family and being a community, having both the first team and reserves training together, I personally think is a really good thing, because whilst everybody might think as training, if the first team get together, they can do set pieces and drills. When you look at, and Rob, you'll know this as well as we do, when you look at the players that are available week on week, actually trying to get the same 11, you've got more chance of picking the national lottery. So, but trying to instill a basics formation and structure on a Sunday and trying to stick to that is a lot better. So I think for me, an hour's training a week, mixed club, bit of banter, bit of chat, bit of ability, seeing what's going on, see if there's anybody there that could go first, or looking ahead to the game ahead, who can play and who's not, sort of thing. I think is a force for good. And again, from my perspective, that's what I've been used to playing for years for the Ibis. It was always mixed ability, and it was a club ethos.
Of course. And so from September through to the end of April, May, when the season ends, what are the biggest challenges doing training week to week when you do have that flexibility of people coming in and out all the time?
It's numbers, really. Like, we just do the training session based on numbers. So we'll try and rotate the training session every week. Because obviously you're not going to have the same sort of people there. As Nev said, you've got mixed abilities there every week. So, we just try and rotate the training up just to hopefully try and keep people as interested as we can and coming back.
Yeah, I think we're lucky. We've got the training as a club. We're also lucky in the sort of Reading area. Rob, you'll be aware of this, but the listeners may not be. About there's a Monday night flexi league, which is operated up at one of the local schools, which enables some of the teams from around the area to have a sort of 11-a-side game for 25 minutes each side. So for us as a club, that gives those players either coming back from injury or want to try out, or maybe didn't get a game at the weekend, the opportunity to play in a match situation. So in addition to training, that also helps us as a club give opportunities to players or give people a run out coming back from injury, etc. So I think that's a force for good. But like James said, the key thing is, unfortunately, within the area that we're in at the moment, trying to get a pitch is a problem. Trying to get a pitch at an affordable price is a problem, because the first thing you've got to think of is how, and the individuals will pay for their subs or whatever, how are they going to cover the cost? And I think that's a big thing. I think that will be a problem for training in the future.
Yeah. So I'm just happy to go straight into it, because I think the light needs to be shed on an issue like this. So the JMA Academy where we train is a school that's funded by the Reading Borough Council. They offset their booking to a third-party agency, and what they do is then set the prices, set the expectations for the football teams coming back each year. last December, they increased the prices by about 6 or 7% due to the cost of living crisis. I'll put that in parentheses because I don't think it was really about that. And then they shell-shocked all the teams up there over the summer and said that they're now going to increase their prices to a further 13.44%. So it's taking our booking, what was around £75 an hour, to nearly 100. And if you want to do any additional fees, you have to pay on top of that. If you want to do weekly invoicing, you've got to pay on top of that. If you want to do a one-off session, you've got to pay VAT, so you have to pay more. So it's becoming untenable, in my opinion. I spoke to Paul and Joe Hales at the Berkshire Football Awards. They sat us right at the back on this little three-person table, like we were lepers at the back, just all on our own, because all the other clubs and everything had big supporters and players nominated going. We're just stuck in the corner. We're just talking, going, are we even going to be able to afford training next year? And at the moment, me and Paul just both shook our heads and said, we have no idea what we're going to be doing. Because we were thinking, how are we going to tell the players that they're going to have to pay more, knowing that the facility is going to basically just up their costs for very little reason? We then went back to the facility and said, can you please go into some detail why you're increasing the prices? And they just basically said, oh, read the initial email, it's all there. But there was a lot to be, said for the way that they've conducted it, and they're not treating grassroots clubs and grassroots. It's not so much about me. I don't like to think about me first and foremost. I like to think about the kids' teams that train up there, and all of the younger age groups that are going to be priced out, mums and dads that won't be able to afford £6 subs going up to 7 or 7 to 8. So yeah, that's kind of what I think. So yeah, I don't know what you guys think about the way that the price of football's heading in that direction, but it just seems to be, for me, it's an alarm bell ringing in the back of my head.
I think it's a problem that's been increasing for a number of years. I mean, I remember when I was managing the Warwick, and we managed to get us down playing at the Ibis. I think it was about 40 quid a game for the pitch and 30 quid for a rep. And you now look at it and you're paying upwards of £100 for a pitch and 50 quid for a ref. So your outlay is for what's there and what's available. I mean, I would, to be honest, for the avoidance of doubt, I would pay refs whatever they're worth. One of the biggest problems in Div 4 is getting a decent ref, because we've all had to ref teams ourselves, in which case causes problems. But I think in terms of the actual cost and the outlay at a grassroots level, be it for Sunday league, for training, and that goes down to kids football, it goes across to women's football. I think it is a big problem when you see the money being poured in at the top. And I'm not saying it should all be filtered down, but I think it's a real big problem in keeping players interested, having the ability for having a process for kids football, boys and girls football moving into men's leagues and women's leagues. I think is a big problem, because whilst there's probably a larger bit of sponsorship at the boys and girls level of football, at the men's level and the women's, it's just a question of economics. And I think a lot of teams are being priced out of training and priced out of Sunday league, just because it's just difficult to keep those costs either down or get the income coming in, unless you've got a big sponsor and something, which, let's be clear, lots of us haven't got that. So
no. And so we're an example of a team that we don't have a sponsor. I just ended up putting our website on because good promotion for our own project. But I've reached out to I've got a very fancy sponsorship document. I call, I email. Nobody seems to be interested in doing business with local football teams, not even football teams, local sports teams in general. Companies aren't aware that they can have the facility of doing tax write-offs for the benefit of writing off tax that goes to the government. They can, any company at any time can write off £2,500 in profit and give it to any type of grassroots or charity. And Sam, both know Sam, my brother, he always says, if you pay tax in this country, you're a fool. You should be able to give it all away to charities and fundraising across the board. And I don't see a lot of companies do it. And it's the fact that these companies are so inundated and busy, they just don't have time to help these teams as well. And the only way that we've ever got funding was we had to go through the Grenham Trust, which is based out in Newbury. They deal with West Berks, going from Tylehurst, where I'm based, all the way out to Burfield and Newbury and areas out west, comparative to Reading. And the way that they raise money is the businesses just hand them over surpluses of cash at the end of the year, and then they hand it out. That's the only way that I've ever seen like local charities work and give out money. So there's a big grey area and a big void between football teams, grassroots clubs in general, regardless of the sport, and actually being able to finance and get that sponsorship in. I don't know about you, Ned, but because you were around a lot more, but when I look at photos of the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s of football teams, they're all sponsored to the hills. Every single one of them.
Yeah, they were. And that's if you can make out the colours, because most of them are in black and white. But yeah, everybody was. I mean, there was my father, my uncle, and my cousin all played for Courage's. They were sponsored when they were a big force in town. You had obviously a lot of the sponsorship. Most clubs were, when the advent of sponsorship came into like the old first division and stuff before it became the Premiership. Most clubs had a sponsor. You'd have a local business person who probably played for the club as well. Let's be clear. So you had an interwoven interest there. There was a team that was Saturday that had a Sunday club. So getting the sponsorship was, even paying for the kit, what at the time was £500-600 for a kit, putting their name on it as well, being sponsored was a big boom. And I think nowadays trying to sustain a club and keep it going without a level of sponsorship or without somebody who is prepared to put some money in or get some grants or what have you, I think is a big problem. But like I say, over the years it has dwindled. I think it's quite positive from what I've seen in the juniors leagues and in the women's teams. I think there is an element of sponsorship there, because the women's team is a big growth area with England doing so well at the moment, and that sort of thing. So I think there is elements of support out there. But if we're looking at men's sort of Sunday league, if you like, I think it's going to need some support at some point, because the costs, the pitches, areas, 3G pitches, etc., are going to price themselves out of the market at some point, in my view, if they don't get, because it's going to be people that are going to say, look, I can't pay, with the cost of living crisis, I can't pay £6 or £7 for Wednesday night training plus my subs on a Sunday or Saturday, because that all adds up. You can see why
a lot of teams don't train anymore.
Yeah, and so for the listeners at home, us in Caversham have the luxury of being able to train every Wednesday night.
Yeah.
There's, how many teams are there in the Reading Sunday League? About 50, 60?
50, I think.
About 50 odd teams.
Yeah.
You'll be lucky if even half of them train. And I think that's a fair push. Maybe I think about 40% train. I know loads of teams that do not train. They just do not bother. They just turn up on Sunday and treat it with a more social care. Whereas somebody like me, I look at training as a necessity, and I try my absolute best to get it on every week. But it's a big problem. And also the lack of facilities as well means that there's a cartel out there. There's, say, 4G pitches in the area. Everybody's trying to fight for them, and they don't see an issue with raising prices, because they know that somebody's going to fill the spot. And if it's not an adult team, it's going to be a five-a-side league that charges you 40 or 50 quid a game for half an hour of football. So so it's a difficult one. We'll move on though, because there's a lot that I want to talk about with Caversham in particular, and about how it's getting on. So one thing that maybe people that don't know football or know how the grassroots structure works. So you guys are in Reading Sunday League Division 4. So Division 4, if I can just put a little bit of a description on it, it's a different type of league compared to other Sunday leagues in the same division. So Premier Division teams are usually the best of the best, the cream of the crop. Then you've got Division 1, Division 2, and some or most of Division 3 that's largely competitive. But Division 4 is always its own animal, in my opinion, because of the way that you have certain teams set up. So because all of us three have been around that type of scene for a while, what are your opinions on the importance of a league like a Division 4, where Caversham Reserves are playing at the moment? Because it seems to be the only league that has its own very clear identity, with it being a lower level of football, and why it's important to keep and maintain that?
It's hard to get out of. I think. The teams in there, as Nev touched on earlier, like the teams like Richfield, Allied, South Reading, us, Thames Valley. There's some good sides in there. And this year, again, there's us, South Reading, Nags Head, Whitley Wood, and other teams as well that are strong. So it's going to be another tough season. But yeah, we're looking forward to it. We're planning well for it already. So
yeah, I think be it Div 4 or Reading and District in the past have had up to 6 divisions and a Prem and Senior. Any entry level league, it is always going to be a lottery, because you've got potentially new teams coming in, and without looking at their squads to see who's signed on, you could get teams that have been playing for many years, accept the standard that they're playing at, want more of a social activity. Then you can get newer teams coming in with perhaps players who could be playing at a high level but want to play socially with their friends, so that the standard can be a lottery sort of year on year. You haven't got a great deal of consistency, so there is that. But like I say, that is that for me is what I would imagine. Whatever leagues up and down the country, the sort of the lowest league, whatever number that is almost like your entry league. And unless you can demonstrate that, or the club pushes to be elevated to another league from being new because of their caliber of players, I think that the standard varies. That doesn't mean to say that there's any detriment to ability. I think there is different abilities across the different leagues in the Reading League, apart from probably when you get to the Prem. And I think some of the games that we had last year in our first season, we were playing teams that have been there for a couple of years, playing new teams that had come in, and all the battles were tough. There's no free ride in Sunday football. And a lot of that stems from, I honestly believe, doesn't matter whether it's a Premier League or Div 4, 1 week every team has suffered this. You're down to bare bones. You could have 30 plus players signed on for one team, and you could be looking at bare bones. And I think I can speak on behalf of the Caversham United Reserves. If ever I've got to put a kit on and boots on, we know we're in trouble, because we haven't got that quality of players there.
Don't forget the masterclass against Barton, mate.
Well, that was only one game, wasn't it? And that was I gave a goal away in that one. But seriously, in terms of, I think there is a quality. Div 4, like you say, Rob, is unique. And I think if you can get out of it, doesn't mean to say it will get. Obviously, if you're going up the league, the standard should improve. But that's not to say you can't enjoy yourselves in it, and you get to know familiar faces, and it becomes like a social piece as well as wanting to win.
So on the topic then of, I'll keep on it, because I want to know your guys' opinion on having teams that drop down into this protected space, or what I believe should be a protected space where clubs should be able to develop and grow at an elementary level all the way up. And then you get certain teams in the pyramid. And for people that don't understand how sometimes the Sunday League cycle works, sometimes you get teams that fold from the top level and start again at the bottom, just for the sake of working back up and winning trophies again. Usually when they're a little bit older. It's a very cheeky what a lot of these teams do. How do you keep these teams out of these divisions that should be protected spaces for elementary teams?
I mean, I think that there's twofold to that. I think one solution could be, and again, agnostic whether it's the Reading League or whether it's other leagues, is to have clubs sign their notice to intent, and then look at this as maybe a committee meeting or something. Have the clubs look at the squads and accessibility there, and then perhaps say to people, actually, hang on a minute, Div 4 is going to be, you're probably going to find it too easy, etc., or you might want to be elevated up. I think certainly if you look at a reserve status club like ourselves, our main aim is to obviously for the team itself to enjoy themselves, and if we can get success off the pitch. But we recognise we've got a first team, so we should be providing sort of better players, and there should be the tension between the first and reserves in terms of ability, up and down. Sometimes you'll get players that aren't comfortable maybe doing that across Sunday leagues, not necessarily in our club. But I think that you've got, one of the things would be to get teams signed on, and then look at the quality of the of the players that they've signed on. Because if you know a team quite rightly is going to smash the league, then you've got a problem. Having said that, if we look at Div 4 for last year, with the teams, I think it was the top two that got promoted. It was competitive down to the last game. The team that won the league, we actually beat in the cup. The team that finished second, we gave them a good game the first game. The second game, we had a scratch 11 out, so we struggled. Played them in the cup final, held them till extra time. Team that finished third, they won one, we won one, and the teams at the bottom, that there was nobody cut adrift, sort of thing. So I think it needs to be enforced by the league, if you like. I think people are going to want to play with their mates, and that's part of keeping team Sunday League football alive, in my view. But I do think some structure around looking at squads and allowing players to or having the club, look at via a committee, look at who's signed on and then elevating them to perhaps their proper level should be being looked at.
And James, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I agree. To be fair, like as Nev was saying, like the standard, like last season was incredible for like some of the teams in Div 4. I think it's got to be looked at. I don't think like certain players should be allowed to drop down that far and stuff like that, like refolding and stuff like that, like folding and then starting up a team in Div 4. I just don't think it should be allowed because this has, I think one of you boys touched on earlier, you've got teams that have been in there for maybe 4 or 5 years who have been trying to get out, but they can't because these other teams have folded and rejoined from the senior league and they just come in and they just annihilate it.
Yeah, and in Div 4, in the Reading Sunday League, the eventual champions haven't lost for 2 consecutive seasons. So you've had 2 winners who have been completely flawless. And we were in that position last season, not the season just gone, 21-22. We were but in Division 4. We only lost 2 games and they were to the champions. And rightfully so, they won the league, but it was a 2-horse race, pretty much, completely the whole way. And same last season between Allied and Richfield. They lost maybe 1 or 2 games between themselves. One of them got to a cup final. So I think that there needs to be a certain address. I would have a different tack on it, and I would make sure that the league had a mandatory committee of well-informed clubs that basically ratted each other out and just made it a competitive and fair league. There's a team in Div 2 this year. I'm not going to name names, but they know who they are. Teams that win leagues and then join other clubs and then with the aim of winning the same league again. I don't agree with, especially when you're constantly fighting with evolving players at current clubs as well. They get put off by that process. I've had several hype train players basically say they don't want to play Sunday League anymore because there's a lot of politics around drop down culture with other football teams, and I want to stamp it out, to be perfectly honest. It's a big bugbear of mine because you do want to enjoy it, and I don't enjoy it when I see things like that happen. You shouldn't see a Step 2 player on a Saturday playing in Div 4 on a Sunday. I don't think it's fair or right.
No.
But I would have a committee of well-informed people in the area that sit down before the season, 2 or 3 weeks before they put the fixtures out, and they really put their heads together and figure out the teams based on their pre-season results, and then they work out a fair constitution from then. And I only mention that because I don't know I'll let you guys have your opinion on it, but the Premier Division in our league is down to 8 teams, and we need to be looking to top end the league rather than filter 14 teams at the bottom leagues and then have 8 to 10 in the first 2 or 3 divisions. I think it's completely unfair. So I don't know what your guys' takes are on that.
Yeah, I think it seems uneven. The fact when we got the league through, we've got 14 teams in our league, and the Prem, for whatever reason, they've only got 8, which again is going to cause them numbers of free weeks, even allowing for cancellations and perhaps cup runs, etc. So I'm whether that will be rebalanced or not. The one thing I would say, if I were a betting man, I would probably stick my neck out to say that if there's 14 teams in the league come the first league game of the system in Div 4, there won't be at the end of it. History dictates that there's always a couple of teams drop out for whatever reason, lack of players, whatever, get hammered for a couple of times, and then there's a big unrest in the changing room and what have you. So I think it should be a balancing act for, like you say, Rob, that the top the top league should be what people aspire to play at. And I think perhaps one thing that could look to solve it and maybe increase the number of teams in the league is if you were to put a cap on the number of players that can sign on for a team. If you set a limit of a number of players being signed on, perhaps you would avoid a lot of players just signing on to play the odd game if it's a cup semi-final or a key game, etc. You'd spread the wealth out for players and players' ability. That could be an option that's looked at, or you get other clubs similar to us setting up first and reserve teams where you can sort of spread the quality of the players between the two. But I certainly think there is an imbalance having 14 teams in Div 4 and 8 in Premier, because that can't be enjoyable for them, because they're going to be not playing for a number of weeks, even allowing for weather and stuff.
Of course. And so with having a player limit, this is something that is a problem, I think, across grassroots. And I touched on it before we got the podcast rolling, but there seems to be a bit of an issue with players at the moment where you have to kind of sign on 40 odd players to get out an 11 on a Sunday morning at the moment, because largely player habits are unreliable. Yeah. Do you think, say, capping it at 25, let's say 25 is a fair number? Because, you know, in olden times, I've spoken to a lot of older people in football, way older than yourself, Neville. Sorry to throw you in that category. No, but I've spoken to people in there. I've spoken to people that have been around since the 60s and the 70s, and they all say the same thing, that the culture has changed now, where kids nowadays just play video games at the weekend. They don't want to leave the house. But back in the day, I know, oh my God, I sound like an old man. I'm only 32. If you had a squad of 16, 15 were available every week, largely. And nowadays you need to basically double that to get a squad of 15 out. You need 40 and then some as well, especially because people get injuries a lot more now as well. But do you think that having a limit would actually end up folding a lot of clubs because of the current culture of players, or?
Maybe over like the winter period, because that's when you obviously like the holidays and stuff like that, like when people go away with their families and they see friends, relatives. That's when you start to see, like, you get just some weeks where you show up with maybe 11, sometimes 2 or 3 subs.
Yeah, I think that the number, again, I think probably when I'm talking numbers, I'm probably talking, I'd probably up it a level in terms of going for maybe 30, 35 per club as a cap. Because some of the teams, because I think that's enough to get 11 players out. Like you say, from talking to, you've spoken to players that played sort of over the 60s and 70s, and I remember going and watching my dad and uncle playing for Courageous and IDM many years ago, where you had one sub, and people would not fight. That's the wrong analogy, but people, that's all they look forward to, that on a Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning. It was playing football with their mates and enjoying it. And if when I started playing and looking at the program when we got the cup on, at the height, the Reading and District League, I think, I had 156 teams. There was sort of divisions 2, 3, and 4 had an East, West, and Central, and there was a Prem and a Senior, and nobody struggled there. So I think there is a cultural piece here, whether it's people having other hobbies or interests, or what people call the FIFA generation or not, I don't know. So, but I think there's certainly, if you do get players that want to play, and we're very fortunate as a club, and I include the women's team in that, in getting players who want to play and getting the right culture, you can attract players and you can field teams week in, week out. And I think that comes down to the structure of clubs.
So do you think, I certainly believe this is the case, but do you think that teams are largely more unorganised than what they used to be? Do you think that there's a bit of a knowledge gap between teams that want to start up? So let's say I'm Joe Bloggs and I live in a random town in the middle of nowhere where there's a group of football players in a community. Do you think that these guys have the resources or the know-how to start a football team now? Do you think it's more complicated to start a team now than what it was in yesteryear? Or do you think that it's the same, but people don't have the same ability to have that motivation to get going? I
think someone touched on it earlier about like having a friend, sort of playing with their friends. I think a lot of teams these days are like very like friends based, and they just want to do it for like a social aspect instead of like a winning aspect. A lot of people just want to get out there on a Sunday, kick a ball about, and then go to the pub after. Like, I don't think a lot of teams actually are interested in maybe doing so well. They just want to get out and do something on a Sunday.
Yeah, I think you've got. I mean, culturally, let's be clear. A lot of the culture as a society that's changed over the years. Like I say, if you look at, we were talking about sponsorship earlier, and you look at Saturday teams and Sunday teams. Let's say, I grew up playing for the Ibis, which was Prudential, basically the insurance company, and before that, a lot of clubs and how they got on were either you had the Peppards and the Thiels and now the Burfields, etc., which were big communities, or you had clubs which derived from people working at the place. So you had IDM, you had a HP team, you had a digital team. Remember, over the years, I think there was a Foster Wheeler many years ago. All local teams. Ad West was a team that they had people playing, and they were part of their workforce as well. So I think but that's culture, and that's changed over the years because a lot of the clubs don't exist. I think in terms of new clubs, I think it is difficult because I think people see. They'll be down the pub one night and they'll say, "Oh, my mate played step 2, for example. He's going to sign on and whatever," and then it becomes a case of brilliant, but then you need to execute and follow through on that. And I think for me, as I've said earlier, it's a question of getting players that want to play rather than begging players to play. I think that's a big thing around setting up, and you need to have a structure around you if you are setting up a club, and being clear of accountabilities and responsibilities. We've all heard the stories of Rob, so-and-so is going to sign on for Hype this year. He had trials at Tottenham. He had trials at Reading. He had trials at whatever. I mean, I had trials at Reading when I was 10 years old. They just looked at me and went, no. But so we could all say that sort of thing. But I think it's a question of people just getting out there and enjoying grassroots football, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah, because my big thing is I'm racking my head about how to get people back involved in football in larger numbers, because it just seems like we're fighting a tide of decline at the moment, and I'm really trying to figure out ways through speaking with people how we can do that. Yeah. One thing is that I feel like the finances is a big pivotal reason why this isn't happening. I spoke to James Mason, who does a lot of the social media, and he went through kind of the levels of squads and the level of detail that these teams need. The average amount of squad players that were playing for teams last season was 42. So each club was having an average of 42 unique players play out for them, because that's what they need to cover their costs. And it's absolutely insane. And a lot of these teams won't be training. On top of that as well, the football pyramid isn't actually the Premier League has legacy payments to grassroots football, and I don't know if you ever heard Simon Jordan on TalkSport, but he constantly harasses the Premier League saying that they've never fulfilled their quotas to the government and grassroots, and it means that there's no money being fed through from the upper leagues. And on top of that as well, the money that used to be pivoted towards male football is now, probably rightfully so, being transferred over to female football. If I started a Hype Train women's team and wanted to go into Caversham's league, I think it would be a very attainable task at the moment without spending too much money on it. So there's those avenues I feel like that are just closed off to men's team originally. If you're sitting down a pub with a group of mates saying, okay, how much money are we going to need? How many players are we going to need? I feel like there's bigger mountains to climb now than what they used to be. And I feel like it puts people off. I've got a lot of players signing on for me next season from a Sunday team that's just folded, purely because of that reason. They don't have enough volunteers and it costs too much money, and they want to go to a setup that they know that they can trust will last. And it's just a really sad state of affairs, if I'm being honest. I don't mean to be a downer about it, but that's how I see the reality of it going at the moment. And I can't see it changing until there's drastic intervention. And I'm talking structural, wholesale changes from the government, putting price caps on training facilities so that grassroots clubs aren't bled dry every week, having caps on football pitches costs. We play down at Calcott Recreation Ground, and I speak to the manager there. They discount the football by about 80%, and that's how much it costs, and we still pay a bomb to play up there. So there's a lot of provision that needs to be put in place just to keep this around. And my head swells basically about it. And I'm trying to figure out ways to, convey to the right people that we need to change things because, it's not happening quickly enough.
No.
Yeah. Right. Well, we'll move on because there are more success stories, and you guys at Caversham have had one. So last year, you guys qualified for the John Lusted Cup final. Myself and Sam, we actually filmed our first showcase event for our YouTube channel. We came down, filmed the game. So just tell me a lot about the experience with that and get into the cup final and what led to that and the actual final itself.
James?
Well, unlike Nev, I've never actually had the opportunity to sort of be like in and around like a cup final. So for me, it was a massive experience, like standing on the touchline with Nev, like the build up to it, like with the boys, all like laughing, joking, like the seriousness of it. I thought it was brilliant. I thought everyone played a massive part in it. Like Rob, Sam, you two were brilliant as well with like the filming and stuff and helping us guys set up as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and obviously, personally, I don't think the result reflected in it. To be honest, I don't think it should have gone to penalties. I think we should have done a little bit more to win that. To be honest, but yeah, as I said, it was a great day for me personally.
And Neville, have you ever been to a cup final before, Neville? Managing or playing?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. I've been very lucky in what can be loosely called a playing career and a managerial career to have played in a few cup finals at the bottom end of the football pyramid, shall we say, Rob? So I won't go through the war stories there, but I was lucky enough to have done it, and everyone, you don't like losing on the day, but I think it's just enjoying it for what it was, and for having a club set up from nothing, playing and getting to the final. I mean, for people that are listening, the team that won our league, who didn't get beat all season, although we did take a point off them. Actually, I think we're one of the only few teams to take a point off them. We're the only team to beat them in all season in the cup. And as the kids say, there was absolute scenes when we beat them in the quarterfinals, and we beat them 3-2 in that semi-final. We played against my old team, Calcutta, who are a fantastic bunch of lads. Great day out for them, great day out for us. The result, to be fair, was a bit flattering. They gave us a big scare in that. So, and again, the semi-final build-up for a team that's new and still evolving, it was a big achievement. So to get to a final in and of itself was a huge plus for the club. I think the fact that we then played Richfield, who we played a couple of times, so Stewie and the guys who have got a great setup at their club knew a load of their players. James knows a load of their team. We all did as well. We went into that game as underdogs. Let's be clear about that. So for me, it was, the pressure was off. Just go out and enjoy it, and we gave it a hell of a go. We drew in 1-1. We had chances to win it, as did they. To be fair, I think the longer the game went on, we were rattled. It was just, in my view, and like I said, as Ben Stokes said at the end of the Ashes, hindsight always wins. I think with extra time, we'd have done it, because I think we were the fitter team. I think their legs were starting to go. But extra time wasn't there. And again, if, as I say to the boys on a week in, week out, which they'll hate me for, invariably in any sport, the team that makes the least mistakes wins. Unfortunately, we missed our first 2 penalties, so you're not going to come back from that. But absolutely chuffed to bits with how we played, how we came across. Everybody was still buzzing afterwards, and literally within 5 or 10 minutes, there was no moratorium on we've lost. It was like, right, the 2 penalty takers who missed, how much can we rinse them for and take the mick out of them, sort of thing. But no malice behind it. It was all love, and it was just, we go on, okay, and then straight in the pub within 2 hours. It was, right, what are we doing for next season then? We're all going to carry on. We're going to stick together. And that's the best thing you can do about Sunday football for me.
Yeah.
100%. Just on extra time, they've amended the rules now with the FA that you can't. That extra time is a thing of the past now. It's done. There's it's now on Saturday League as well. I only noticed this when I went to my Saturday League AGM, the East Parks League. It was the first thing they said. There's no extra time now. We're done with it. Our team only ever played one ever game in extra time, and it was in our we won the President's Cup in the EBFL a couple of years ago. We had a ridiculous run to the final. We had bare 11s all the way until the final, I think, and it was just we had the first game. We were winning 2-1. We didn't have a goalkeeper, so we were just playing with somebody that we knew at the time, and they equalised with the last kick of the game. And then from kickoff, one of our midfielders, Gino, who plays for South Reading now, says, "Oh, Rob, I can't move. I don't think I can go for extra time." And then the very next thing that happens, we go up for a corner, we win the corner, and then somehow we scramble in the corner, and our players collapse on the halfway line who can't move. And then in the quarterfinal, we played a team called Frontline, very, very, very technically good team out in the Slough area. They had a large chunk of the ball and we were countering. It was on a big 4G pitch as well, similar to the size of our pitch at the JMA, really big and wide. It went all the way to extra time, and the referee just would not blow the whistle in extra time until they got a goal. The extra time period went on for 44 minutes, and the extra time in the second part was 9 minutes alone. And the ball was in play all the time, and they missed an open goal pretty much, and the referee said, "Okay, I've tried my best." Then he blew the whistle.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, so that experience of extra time for us was arguably one of my favourite ever memories, because, you know, it's 30 minutes extra of going through the wars.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's a bad thing that we've gotten rid of extra time in grassroots, or do you think that it's a benefit because of people's time?
James?
To be fair, I quite like a penalty shootout, to be fair. So, yeah, I mean, as Nev said, I think with our lot, I think if we'd have had the extra time, I think we'd have nicked it.
Yeah,
so, yeah, I'd quite like to still see it in the game.
I must admit, Rob, I'm with you. I think with the EFL League Cup and stuff, fine. If you need to do it because there's a fixture congestion at that level of the game, fair enough. But for us, it's going to be very rare. Let's be clear. In Sunday League football, I think probably across most leagues in the United Kingdom, it's very rare that you don't get many draws. Certainly in Div 4, no. And for us to draw that game in a final, I think is the extra time just allows people, because you're just carrying on both in terms of fitness and ability. Penalty shootouts, whether we like it or not, and I would say it because we like, is a lottery. You've got you can't control. You can practice. And the week before, I think we practiced penalty shootouts and stuff. It's irrelevant because you're not playing. For some players, that will probably be the only final they may play at. Whatever level you play at, you're in a final. It doesn't matter. It's your day out, so you want to enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think extra time. Maybe if it got to semis and finals, then definitely. If it's previous games, say for example you haven't got a ref, you might want to not bother. But I think certainly in any level, semis and finals should have extra time, because I think for the sake of a half hour, you got that extra time built in, not the extra time, but people have got busy lives, etc. Appreciate that. But a semi-final and a final, you've normally maybe got your family come in, or you've made provision sort of thing anyway. So you're going to make yourself available for that time. So why not just have it?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, completely agree. I feel like it's just being stripped away. Like we had a cup, we got knocked out from our cup, the Industrial Cup, on penalties, and we had dominated the game, and they had 2 shots, and we could. To be fair, we had an off day in front of goal, but largely, if it went to extra time, there was no way they were going to get through. And and again, the luck of the draw. Our top 2 goal scorers took our first 2 penalties, missed, similar to you guys in the final. Yeah. And before we know it, we're out and everything. It's tough work. And so yeah, hopefully the FA revised that for later rounds in cup games, because it's just like that. Honestly, our quarterfinal was the best thing that we could have gone through. And also, I feel like from a morale point of view, if you go through and you win an extra time period, it's insane. Afterwards, it bonds teams a lot more. For us, we scored in the very first minute of extra time. We have a player called Callum Parr Jones, and he is an incredible footballer. he has a knack of just picking up the ball from 40 yards out and just levering it into the goal. Usually, he only scores worldies for us, and he did it in the first minute of extra time. They had this team front line. It equalised with a 40-yard golazo of their own, virtually with the last kick of the game. They've all gone into their halftime, their full-time team talk, buzzing, and we're completely depleted and down. We were 10 seconds away from winning it, and then 10 seconds later, when it kicks off, we scored. He's literally picked up the ball, I've thrown it to him, and he's just banged it in first time for 45 yards out. And stuff like that bonds and melds teams a lot. So hopefully they can bring that back again. But yeah, any chance I have to tell that story, I'm going to always tell it because it's it's fascinating. Right, let's just cover one more thing today. So with running a reserve team, I think this is an important area because we kind of have touched on it, but running a reserve team now seems to be a rarity for football clubs. When we went to the AGM in Reading at the Pearly Barn, there's only now 3 or 4 teams in the Reading and Sunday League that have reserve teams.
Yeah.
So what is the additional things that you guys need to have in provision to make a reserve team last? Because they seem to be a dying breed from my point of view, probably because we've touched on it about player availability, but what does it take for you guys to make that extra effort? Like, how much more manpower does it take with having your setup compared to me? My club at Hype Train is me and Sam, and then a bunch of players and everything like else. What do you need extra as a caveat to run your reserves?
Go on, Nev, I'll let you answer that.
I think you need a good structure, clear accountabilities and responsibilities. So from Paul through to the first team managers as well, and having support around us in terms of obviously James and myself. Paul being aware we've got somebody on the reserve team for this season to collect the fees and the subs, etc. So it's having that network in place. It is difficult with a reserve team because certainly for last season, because you as with any new club, ignoring whether the reserves is in the title or not, you've got a number of players, some of which I've been fortunate enough to play, some of which didn't know from Adam. So you're trying to gel a team there, and certainly going into this, when I approached a few players to sign on, it was with them. I knew they would be going to the first team, without doubt, because that they could play at that level, and it was just giving them the confidence and nudge to say, look, go to the first team, have a go. If you don't like it, you've always got the reserves, and they're still in the first team now, sort of thing. So that was a big positive. So I think setting up, having a first and reserve team, the key are, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, is having sort of good communication. I think there is, it's a balancing act between getting players to play at the right level, and there's some players that want, like we've said earlier, that want to play with their mates. So you've got to be acutely aware of the sort of social networks within the club, between the first, not just within the first and reserves, but between who's mates with who, and who wants to go and play with who, sort of thing. So sometimes that's just part of sort of man management, in my view. So I think there's a number of facets you've got to take into account when you're managing a first and reserve team. The biggest thing is obviously communication and being clear who you want to play and who you sign on. And again, we've got a number of trialists. We've had a couple of friendlies and fixtures, sort of thing. And we're very fortunate. Some of the players we're looking to sign on, not necessarily for the reserves, but as a club, are a big asset. So we've got to make sure that we're working collectively as a club to get them integrated in the club. Be very clear what's expected. Excuse me, what won't be tolerated. And like I say, you're right. I mean, clubs years ago, I remember Burfield are probably the exception at the moment, Rob. I think where you had a first of reserve and A's and B's, and you're very lucky now to find a reserve team. So I think that we're very lucky within Caversham with the structure and the setup that we've got. We've got a great bunch of lads for the men's team, fantastic bunch for the women's team as well, in terms of their setup and their structure and their storming and norming sort of thing in their league as well. So we're very lucky to have a good structure in place, which is primarily based around football. There's a social element to it, but then it's been very clear around the social aspects of it as well, and being fortunate that with our Twitter presence and with the people we've got on board throughout all three teams, we just make sure we connect and get on with it. And if there's a problem, we back up and support each other.
And James, stepping into this environment where there's 40, 50, 60 plus people as well, how hard is it for you guys as a management team to keep people happy in this scenario? So from my point of view, I've been in a couple of Saturday and reserve teams. That's okay. He'll come back in. That's fine. We'll let him come back in.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there we go. He's going to come back in eventually.
On down.
You're right there, James.
Shopkeeper. You're right.
Good, mate.
Yeah. But no, I was just yeah. Go on. No, so I was just saying, so obviously first and reserve teams, when they work, have really good facets about them, as Neville said, but you have to obviously communicate that. But there can sometimes be issues with clubs of this stature. Do any of these exist at Caversham? I'll give you some examples. I used to be part of a multi-tier setup where you would have drop-down culture, so people dropping down and people getting preference and like little cliques forming as well. How do you guys try to combat that as a management team? Like, what are the big things that you guys obviously are actively talking about?
Yeah, like between both teams, I think there's like a lot of good players, as we sort of covered before. Like, there's players who could step up, and there's players from the first team who want to sort of step down. So we've never sort of stopped anybody from, if they want to step up, to step up. We've always encouraged them to think, if they want to sort of step up, to go and give it a go and stuff like that. And if people want to step down, to come and have a try and see what it's like for the reserves, to see how they feel. A lot of the players who come down to us to have a game quite enjoyed like the atmosphere and stuff like that, I'd say.
So I'll get both of your takes on this as well, because this is something that I found interesting at the AGM. So there was a topic that got brought up about the amount of players that can maneuver between the first and reserve teams. So this was to try to combat potential bigger teams scalping, especially when it comes to cup competitions. Do teams like Caversham and all these reserve teams need the extra flexibility? So the rule in place, because I'll explain for people at home, is that at the moment you can have any player play up to a certain amount of games for the reserve team. And what they wanted to do was cap that at three games for any player. And if at any time after that and they played a fourth game, they were locked into that one team, or they couldn't step in and play for the reserves anymore. So do you guys need the extra flexibility as well?
I think last season we did, because we didn't know who was with the ability levels. You get very little from a sort of training session for an hour. Pre-season, it's difficult to judge. And I think the rule was, I think it's capped at 5 now if you've played, or we can only include up to 3 players who have played more than 5 games for the first team, I think it is, sort of thing.
That's it.
So I think that's the rule that we have to stick to. Obviously, with the advent of team sheets, again, I'm not a big fan of team sheets. I'm not sure what they prove, but I think that we have to. We're acutely aware that everybody knows everybody else in Sunday League football. So if you are going to play a number of players, personally, we've stuck to the 3 rules. I don't think, on the basis that all bar 1 or 2 games, we've had players from the first team come down. That's mainly for fitness, because we've got enough players within our own squad and structure. And I don't think it's fair within a reserve team culture to bring a player in just because you're playing a bigger team. You want to judge them on their own ability. If people are coming back from injury, or if we want to promote people to the first team, I think that's a big plus. I'm not sure what the 3-game rule, excuse me, would achieve. I mean, like I say, my aim and the first team's aim is to sign on enough players so we've got almost like 2 healthy squads, because if we're struggling between the 2, we're all going to be in trouble. So I think that without that, again, I don't see whether it's capped at 3 games or whatever. You can't really get an assessment of players. again, it goes back to the other point, the other big issue in whatever level of the tiered level, whether it's Reading or different leagues, etc. You're always potentially going to have ringers playing anyway, so you've got issues with are they signed on for whom or what have you, sort of thing, and it's just it's difficult to know what to do with that sort of thing. But I think in terms of the reserve team players and the first team players, maybe 3 or 5 games, and then you can field no more than say 2 or 3 players. I think if you're going up from reserves to first, I think it should be uncapped, because you're basically that should be upping the quality. But if you want to if somebody wants to put that rule in, that's fine. We'll deal with it. We'll stick to it. It won't be a problem for a club like ours, because we'll stick to those rules anyway.
Of course. And just to finish, one final question. So you guys are in Reading District Sunday League Division 4, as we've previously mentioned. So what are your guys, do you guys set aims and ambitions to where you want to finish for the season ahead? What's kind of your goals for the next year?
I think for me, it's to build on the success we've had last season. I think that'd be difficult and a challenge. I think getting to a cup final in our inaugural season was a massive plus for the club. As we all know, cups very much are a lottery in terms of who you play, when you play, how you play, etc. So it's a one-off game. So I think that would be something we'd look at. I think looking at the teams in our league, as we've said before, Div 4 is a very strong league, perhaps with a lot of teams that have got mixed ability. So I think just building on the success, and again, I don't wish to sound cliche or coy, but it's Sunday morning football. If we can't enjoy it, don't bother getting out of bed. And if you don't want to play, don't play. Just go out there, enjoy it. Yes, during 90 minutes, there is a very good chance if you're playing in a team that I manage, you're probably going to get shouted at some points. That's inevitable. Even if you're doing the right things, if it's positive or negative, I'm going to be shouting at some point, because I still think I should be playing, even though I know I can't, and I'm nowhere near the caliber of the players we've got. It is just to enjoy it and get on with it. If we can get cup success, fantastic. If we can do well in the league, big positives. But we've got to build on our success. And if the results aren't going our way, which they might do for a couple of weeks, perhaps, we don't lose our heads. We keep together as a team. We keep together as a social and a good team spirit.
And James, what about you, mate? What are you looking forward to for the season?
Yeah, same, to be honest. Like, after like the cup success we had, and in the end we had a bit of a strong finish in the league, I'd like to sort of aim for sort of 1 to sort of 3 in the league finish, maybe. I think we can do it. Like, we've had a good pre-season. I think going into the season, we just got to keep the momentum going. And yeah, again, I'd love another cup run. I'd love to get back to the final again. And obviously, being alongside Nev again this season, I know between the both of us, we've brought another coach in as well, Jamie. So between obviously me, myself, and me, Nev, and Jamie, we've put plans in place already to get us going. So.
Perfect. And just to end, do you guys have any shout outs that you want to give out to Caversham? Because, we want to celebrate some people involved in grassroots football here. I know that we mentioned Paul as well. But are there any people at Caversham that deserve any special shout outs before we go?
All 3 teams, to be honest. Men's, first team, reserves, women's, everyone involved.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to name, because if you start naming, you'll be like thinking. I think Paul's the obvious one. We've got new managers in place for the first team, new manager in place for the women's team, so we just wish them every success. And to all 3 of the teams that may or may not listen to this and rip the what out of James and I when this goes out, Rob. We just keep going for another season. Just enjoy it. They can look forward to my not very useful team talks, listen to me repeating the same old stories every week in, week out, and as long as they do as they're told, we'll be all right. I think that's all I want to say, really.
No, I just want to say thank you for
me as well.
Sorry, go on.
No, that's right. Just for a big shout out to you and Sam, really, Rob, just for obviously what you've done for us in the final and stuff, with all the video in, and obviously getting us on here tonight as well to be able to speak to you as well.
No, of course.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. The one thing I did, it's almost like you prompted me now. The one thing I would say, and I know it sounds cliched and coy, is whilst we're on it, is a thank you to those the officials that are involved in the Reading and Sunday District League, because
100%.
they've been doing it for many years, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at in terms of perhaps a succession plan or something for them. But the men and women that support sorting the fixtures out and deal with all the aspects of the league and have to conform, etc. Let's be clear, we couldn't do it without them. And then any referees that are looking for weekly games for Caversham, that'll be my begging bowl as much, because trying to get hold of a ref is more trying to get hold of. It's like getting hen's teeth at the moment in our league. But no, everybody who's involved in grassroots football, all the teams, all the leagues, we just need to get on with it and enjoy it. So big shout out to everybody there.
No, apart from that, thanks for having you both on, and we'll just leave it there. And I just want to say again, thanks for coming on. We'll hopefully air this in not too long for time. But yeah, thanks for both of you for coming on.
No problem, mate. Thank you for having us. Cheers, mate.
So just on the door out of the podcast today, I just again want to thank James and Neville for their time today. It's always appreciated that somebody has the time for me on my podcast. It's great learning about experiences from different teams, from different aspects, and how different clubs run, function, and the experiences that take place within different clubs. I've really enjoyed some of my podcasts recently. Talking with James Rowe at Burfield, I've had a really good experience understanding what it takes to run a multi-tier setup, even if I've just learned a minor fraction of what it takes, because James is only involved in the adult male section of it. Today I've learned a lot about what it takes to run a reserve team and some of the complexities and the challenges that go along with it as well. I thought Neville in particular has a very strong commanding voice, and James is the perfect adage so that they've got a good cop bad cop relationship. Teams like reserve teams need more volunteers on hand, so it's great to have two people that have a unilateral focus to making sure that Caversham and their whole club setup works as well. Aside from that, if you want your club story heard on the podcast, please reach out. I'd love to hear from everyone. I've put the club email below in case you want to reach out and have a guest spot on an upcoming podcast. We run fortnightly, and again, if you hate me, if you love me, if you're indifferent to us and our podcast, I'd still like to speak to everybody as well. I just don't want to be surrounded by people that I get on with. I want to be challenged and learn and grow as well. Aside from that, we're on the road to 1,000 followers on our podcast as well as our YouTube channel, and would really like it if you hit that subscribe button as well. We've got more podcasts upcoming for you in the few weeks, and don't be sure to miss out on that. So hit that notification button right now. Apart from that, I'll leave you be. I hope you've enjoyed our podcast today, and as ever, until next time, believe the hype.